This is lesson 3.2, compound interest. This is a grade 11 college lesson. So if you are in grade 11 college, this lesson is for you. The learning goals for this lesson are that we are learning to find the variables p, I, and n that we're going to put into our equation for calculating compound interest. A equals P times brackets 1 plus I and bracket N. Don't worry about that. We're going to be talking about that in a second. And we're also learning how to calculate A. So we're looking to find all of our variables that go into the equation in order to find A. Please take out your handout 3.2 compound interest that is given to you in class. We're going to follow along with the examples in it. Firstly, there's this giant equation at the top of your handout, and it looks like this. A equals P bracket 1 plus I bracket N. So you do not need to memorize this equation. I'll always give it to you, but this is what we're going to be using for the rest of this unit on financial math. So just as a reminder from last lesson, 3.1, where we looked at simple interest versus compound interest, we remember when we did calculations of simple interest, we found that the interest that we would pay every single month, so if you sat down in a bank and a bank offered you a savings account for your $1,000 and they offered you simple interest rate of 1.2% or compound interest rate of 1.2%, simple interest, we remember, the interest rates or the interest that you are going to be paid is going to stay the same for every single year. But with compound interest, we noticed that it increased every single year. So how we calculate how much your account is worth is by using this formula. So it might look scary right now, but we're going to use it 1,000 times and it's going to become easy for you. So on your handout, I have it listed, and I also have listed what every variable stands for. So first we have this A. And in your handout, it's called the accumulated value. So this is the value of your account. So if you want to add extra notes, you can. And it's the value of your account in the future. So not at the exact moment you put in your $1,000, but maybe the value of your account in 10 years if you put in $1,000. The P stands for the principal or initial value. So this is the initial investment of money. So if you put in $1,000 into your bank account today, that would be your P, principal. That's what the P stands for, principal. And then we have I. And if you were with us for our lesson on 3.1, you would know that I would definitely stand for the interest rate. But it's not just the interest rate, it's the interest rate per or for that period. And we're going to talk about what that means in a second. And then N, our last value, N stands for the number of periods that you leave your money in the account. Number of periods. So if we're talking a yearly basis, that's what the question's talking about, and you leave your money in the account for 10 years, N would be 10. But if we're talking about a monthly basis and you leave your money in the account for 2 years, then we're talking an N is going to be 24 months. So we're going to talk about that in a second. What I'd like you to do now is if you go to the middle of the first page of your lesson, you'll see a lovely chart that I've duplicated here, which is going to help us solve the problems for this lesson and for the rest of the unit. So this chart is really important that you fill it out. First of all, you're going to see these words all the time. Annually, semi-annually, quarterly, monthly. And we have to know what they mean. So firstly, we've got annually. So if you were to say that you do something annually, the meaning of that is once per year. So if you clean your room annually, that means that you clean your room once per year. if we were talking about a question that involved interest, which is exactly what we're doing in this lesson, and you were told that your total principal amount was compounded annually, so once per year, you're going to leave the interest rate unchanged. So if you do not, oh, I think I'm running out of room here. If you do not understand what this means, don't worry. I just want you to copy it down and we're going to use this information later. So I'm going to put unchanged here. And we are also going to leave n unchanged. So just copy down this chart. What's most important is that you understand what the meaning of each of these are. Okay, so let's do the next one. If you clean your room annually, and that means you clean it once per year, semi-annually would mean twice per year. Twice per year. What you're going to do with the interest rate, please just copy this down. Don't worry if you don't understand it just yet. Is you would take the interest rate and divide it by 2 because we're going to be compounding twice per year, and you're going to take n and multiply by 2. Now let's take a look at quarterly. Semi-annually means you clean your room twice per year. Quarterly means that you can guess it, clean your room 4 times per year. 4 times per year. So you might see the pattern here. What you're going to do with the interest rate, if the question says that the bank is compounding your loan or your investment quarterly, you're going to not divide by 2, but divide by 4. And what you're going to do with n is times it by 4. So you might see a pattern here. Okay, and last, if you clean your room monthly, I think we know what that means. How many times per year? If you cleaned it monthly, which means every month, 12 times per year. If you want to use the number 12 instead, go for it. And follow the pattern. We're going to divide the interest rate by 12, and we are going to multiply n times 12. So we're going to be referencing this chart for the rest of the lesson. So please make sure you've got everything copied. If you haven't, pause the video before you keep going. All right, let's try example number 1. And we're going to learn this formula together. So example number 1 says, find A, P, I, and N given the following information. So A says that you have a $2,000 investment at 5% per year, compounded annually for 3 years. So let's break this down. It might seem very complicated right now, but as we do it, you're going to realize this is very simple. So let's remember that we are finding P. So I'm going to write these down. We're finding I. We're finding N. And we're finding A. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to underline what I think is P, underline what I think is I, underline what I think is N, and then A. So if we take a look back at our formula, here we go. Remember that P, here we go, is our initial investment of money, our principal. So we can see right here that we have invested $2,000. So we know that this must be our initial investment. So I'm going to write down that P has to equal $2,000. Let's take a look for I. If we go back to take a look at what I stands for, I stands for the interest rate for that period. So let's go back. Where can I see the interest rate? Well, I can see that the interest rate is 5%. Now, before we write, so I'm going to write interest rate equals 5%. Now, before I can conclude that and I realize I used the wrong color here. Instead of yellow, I should have used blue. So I'm going to change that to blue. There we go. Before I can conclude that the interest rate is 5%, I have to check whether our loan or our investment is being compounded annually, semi-annually, quarterly, or monthly, which is exactly what we made our chart for. So if I read through here, I can see that our investment is compounded annually. So if we know it's compounded annually, I'm going to go back to our chart. Here's our chart. And I can see, here's annually, and I can see that I know that it's compounded once per year. And this means this is what I'm going to do to the interest rate is not do anything. So I'm going to not change it. And what I'm going to do to n is also not change it. So let's go back to our question. So because it's compounded annually, our chart says we're not going to change our interest rate. So we're going to leave it 5%. So we know that we're going to leave it 5%, but we know we have to change that into a decimal. If you remember from lesson 3.1, to change a percentage into a decimal, we, not times, but divide by 100. So you put into your calculator 5 divided by 100. That's just going to equal 0.05. Now let's figure out n. If we take a look back at our equation, we remember that n, here it is just equal to the number of periods. So let's take a look. Okay, so we're just reading the question again. $2,000 investment at 5% per year compounded annually for 3 years. So this must be our number of periods. Here we go. For 3 years. So I'm going to write the number 3. Before I conclude that this n is going to be 3, let's go back to our chart. Make sure we know that we are talking about something compounded annually. We know that means once per year. The interest rate we did leave unchanged, and n also says leave it unchanged. So that's what we're going to do. So let's go back to our example. We're going to leave n unchanged, just like it said. And what we're looking for, we're given p, we're given I, we're given n, and all we'd have to find is a. So we do not know what a is. So this is what example 1 is asking us to do. We're just going to find p, I, and n, and in the next examples we're going to plug them all in together. So let's try another example. Okay, and in B we have the exact same question. Find a, p, I, and n given the following information. So we're told we've got a $1,000 loan at 8% per year, compounded semi-annually for 2 years. So I already know we're dealing with semi-annually. Okay, so I know where I'm going to go on my chart. So let's write out all the things that we're looking for again. We're looking for P, so I'm going to write P. We're looking for I, and I'm just taking this out of the question. It says find P, I, N, and A. We're looking for N, and we're looking for A. Here we go. P, go back to see what P stands for. P is just our initial amount that we put in, either investing or we took out a loan. What's the initial amount? Well, we can see that we have a $1,000 loan. So we know that that must be the initial amount. So I'm going to write $1,000. Here we go. Now I'm looking for I. If you take a look back at the equation, we know that I just stands for the interest rate. Where do you see the interest rate? Well, I see it right here. I've got 8%. So let's write out 8%. But I know I've got to go check my chart to make sure that I can leave this 8% as it is. So we remember this is compounded semi-annually. So let's go back to our chart. There it is. Okay, so we are in the semi-annual section here, which means twice per year. What do I do with I? Well, I have to divide it by 2, says our chart. So that's what I'm going to do. So back to our question. The chart says if it says semi-annually, I got to divide this I by 2. So that's what I'm going to do. So I've got 8% divided by 2 is just 4%. And I can't leave it like that. I've got to put it into a decimal. So I'm going to divide to put a percent into a decimal. You just divide by 100. Put that into your calculator, and that comes out as 0.04. So I've got my interest rate, and now I've got to find n. And if you take a look at what n means, it just means the number of periods. Well, if I take a look through here, I can see that it's going to be compounded for 2 years. So that must be my n. But I can't just leave it like this. I've got to go back to my chart and see what it says for semi-annually with n. So let's go back. Here we are. So here's semi-annually. We know it's twice per year. Yes, we left the interest rate, or we divided the interest rate by 2. What does it say for n? We've got to multiply it by 2. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, so here we are back at the example. We know we have to multiply n by 2, says our chart, so that's what we're going to do. And we've got equals, and 2 times 2 is just 4, so the number of periods is 4. And finally, A, which is our total value, our total future value at the end of the 2 years. We don't know what that is. We're looking for A. So you can probably start seeing a pattern here. The principal, we can just read right off the question. A is what we're looking for in this lesson. And I, we're also going to read off the question, but we got to make sure, we got to check the chart to see if we're dividing by 2, leaving it the same, dividing by 4. Same with n. We can read it right off the question, but we have to make sure, check our chart to see if we times by 2, leave it the same, times it by 4, times it by 12. So hopefully you'll be getting the hang of it. Let's try one more together, and then I want you to try one on your own. All right, let's try this last one together. If you think you're getting a hang of it, try it on your own. Pause the video, try this on your own, by all means. So we are given the information. First of all, we're doing the same thing. We're finding A, P, I, and N. And we're given the information that we have a $50,000 loan, big money, probably bought a car. So we've got a $50,000 loan at 12% per year, compounded quarterly for 5 years. So already, I, N should be jumping out at you, but let's do this one by one. So once again, I'm going to write out all the things we're looking for. So I'm going to write P equals, I'm going to say I equals, we're also looking for N, and then we're looking for A. Okay, first of all, P. P is the principal, or the initial amount of money we're either taking out of the bank or we're investing. So that initial amount of money that we're taking out or investing is $50,000. We are getting $50,000 initially. So our principal is going to be $50,000. All right, so far so good. Now let's look for I. I we know is the interest rate. So here we go, looking around, and I see, oh, we've got a 12%, and we know if we see a percentage, that's our interest rate. So I'm going to write 12%, and then am I done? I hope that you're shouting no, because I see that this is compounded quarterly. So we're always looking for that word. Annually, quarterly, semi-annually, monthly. So to figure out if I leave this interest rate the same or change it, I've got to go back to my chart. So that's what I'm going to do. And we are in the quarterly now, which means that we're going to compound it 4 times per year, or the bank is going to compound our interest 4 times per year. And what am I going to do with the interest rate? Well, I have to divide it by 4, says our chart, so that's what we're going to do. So here we are back on our question. I know I can't leave the interest rate at 12% because we're dealing with quarterly, and our chart says I've got to divide that by 4, so that I'm going to do. What is 12 divided by 4? That is just 3%, but I can't leave it like that. I've got to put into a decimal. So to change a percentage into a decimal, we know we just divide by 100, and we're left with 0.03. Now let's do the same for N. N is the number of periods that we're leaving in the bank, or that we are keeping our loan until we have to pay it back. So the number of periods, if you take a look, is that we're going to compound this, or we're going to keep this loan for 5 years. So our number of periods are 5. But can we just leave this here? We got to check. So let's go back to our chart. Our chart is, we're dealing with quarterly this time, which you know means 4 times per year. Interest rate, yes, we divided by 4. But what do I have to do with N? I have to multiply it by 4. So let's do that. Okay, here we are back at our question. So I know we have to multiply N by 4, so I'm going to times this by 4. 5 times 4 is just 20. So I know N equals 20. And finally, A. A is our total value at the end of the entire period. So at the end of the 5 years, how much is our loan worth? That we don't know. We'll be given everything except for one thing, and I already mentioned in this lesson we're always looking for A. Now for this last example, D, I want you to try it on your own. So I suggested to try C on your own, but D I want you to try on your own. So pause the video here. Try to highlight what you think is P, I, and N, and then restart the video to make sure that you've done it correctly. Okay, so if you're listening to this video, you will have tried example 1D on your own, and now you're just checking your answer. So just as a note, I told most of you that I did business in university, and just so you know, this is what they teach in university. So you are doing not just high school university math, you're actually doing the math that they do in university. I learned this in first year university and third year university. So if you can understand this and you can pick this up at the end of the lesson, good for you. Excellent job. So let's do this last one together. Remember, we're still finding A, P, I, and N. So that's what I'm going to write. I'm going to write P. I'm going to write I. I'm going to write N. And we're always looking for A. Okay. So as you read through this, we've got a $750 investment at 6% per year, compounded monthly for 1 year. So already this should stick out to you. Okay, I know I'm going to go for monthly in my chart. So P, principal, the initial amount of money that I've invested. Well, I can see that's just $750. So that's what I'm going to write. Principal is $750. Our interest rate now, I see a percentage, 6%. Can I leave it at 6%? I don't know. I got to go check my chart. I know we're compounding monthly, so we're going to go back to the chart, Here we go. Okay, and we're in monthly. We know that means that the bank is going to compound our interest 12 times per year. And interest rate, got to divide that by 12. So let's do that. So I'm going to take this interest rate now, divide it by 12. So I'm always going to be referencing that chart. You should be referencing it all the time for every single question. 6 divided by 12, that is, if you put into your calculator, 0.5%. We can't leave that the way it is. We have to divide that by 100 to get a decimal. And if we divide that by 100, what we get is 0.005. So there's our interest rate in a decimal. So now let's do N, the number of periods. How many times are we going to be compounding? Well, it says 1 year. Okay, so that's the length of time. So let's put 1. Can I leave it as 1? Gotta go check. Gotta go check to the chart. I know I'm compounding monthly. So here we go. Compounding monthly. And N is, we're going to multiply it by 12. That's what we're going to do. Okay, so we're back here. We know we have to multiply this by 12. Equals 1 times 12, just 12. Okay, so we've got P. Whoops, we've got P. We've got I. We've got N. And A, we don't know. We don't know what the future value of this investment is going to be. So now we've got all the information. We can try the real questions now. So now we're going to try example number 2. And you're going to see because we did this exercise, it's actually not that difficult. We can do it. All right, so let's do example 2 together. So I'm going to read out example 2. It says, determine how much money you will have if $500 is invested for 6 years at 4% per year, compounded semi-annually. Determine how much money you will have at the end of this period. So we know that we are looking for A. So as soon as you see the word compounded, you know that we're using that equation that we've got at the beginning on the first page of your handout, which is that A equals P times 1 plus I to the power of N. So we know before we start anything, we're looking for all of these things. We're looking for P, we're looking for I, we're looking for N. So, and we have no idea what A is. So I'm going to write A equal, oops, A, oh, I'm having some issues here. Hold on 1 second. There we go. And we don't know what A is. Okay, so let's do what we've been doing. And now we can all do this together. So let's find P. We know P is our principal. How much do we put in initially? How much money will you have if $500 is invested? So we know that our principal is $500. All right, now let's find that interest rate. Where is I? If I look through, I see 4%. We've got our interest rate is 4%. Can we leave it that way? I don't know. Let's take a look at this question. It's compounded semi-annually. So that's what I'm going to look for on my chart. Let's go back. Here we go. Here's semi-annually. We know it's twice per year. What does that mean to our interest rate? Divide that by 2. All right, we can divide the interest rate by 2. All right, so we'll take our interest rate, divide that by 2. 4% divided by 2, that's just 2%. Don't leave it as a percentage because we can't put that into our calculator. We're going to put it as a decimal. change percentage into a decimal, just divide by 100, and that's going to be 0.02. You can try it out yourself. Now let's find n, the number of periods that the bank is going to compound. I'm looking, and I see it's invested for 6 years, so that must be our n. Let's take a look at our chart to see what we'll do with the n. So we know it's compounded semi-annually. Let's go back. Okay, here we go. Semi-annually, twice per year. We divided the interest rate by 2. Now we've got to multiply n by 2. So let's take this n and let's multiply it by 2 equals 12. Okay, so we've got everything. We're just going to plug it all in now. So I'm going to scroll up. Let's see if I can get this to work. Here we go. Beautiful. Okay, so we're going to rewrite our equation. So we're always using this equation with compound interest. A equals P times 1 plus I all to the power of n. And now we're just going to plug in the information we know. Do we know what A is? Nope. So I'm going to write A again. Do we know what P is? Yes, it is 500. So write 500. All right, we know what, okay, we can just write 1. Do we know what I is? Absolutely. We know it's 0.02, so that's what I'm going to write, 0.02. And do we know what n is? Definitely. We're going to write 12. So it's really important that you don't right off the bat start plugging everything in. You have to write these out one by one. P, I, N. Calculate them all individually and then plug everything in. It's going to be so much easier. So now you can plug this all into your calculator. However, sometimes when you plug everything into your calculator, you make little mistakes. So what I'm going to do is do it sort of step by step. So we're using BEDMAS. First of all, we remember BEDMAS. I'm going to write it out. What do we do first? Brackets. Okay, so I got to do brackets first. So I'm going to do 500. Then 1 plus 0.02 is just 1.02. You can plug that into your calculator. Power of 12. So brackets done. Next, exponents. So I'm going to do 1.02 to the power of 12 first. And then I'm going to multiply that by 500. So go ahead and put it into your calculator. And the answer that you should get is $634.12. So go ahead and check, make sure that you got the same answer. And once you're done, let's not forget what the question was asking. The question was asking, determine how much money you will have if $500 is invested for 6 years. So how much money we're going to have is $634. So we can say at the end of 6 years, we will have $634.12. That's pretty awesome. Free money. Woohoo! All right, let's try the last example together. Okay, so here is our last example. So this is example number 3. I'm going to read it out, and you can read along as well. Alice borrowed $5,000 to start a small business, which many of you will do in your life. So many of you will be in this position of borrowing money from a bank to start your own business. The interest rate on the loan was 9% per year. Woo, that's high. Compounded monthly. She is expected to repay the loan in full after 4 years. So part A asks, how much must Alex repay? So we're talking about at the end of the 4 years. So what we're looking for is the future value of what it's worth. So the recording time on this lesson is about to end. So this is going to be part 1 of the lesson. And part 2 is the next video right underneath it on Edmodo. So please go ahead right now and go to part 2 of the lesson. So one more time, this is part 1 of the lesson, 3.2. My recording time is about to end, so there's going to be a second video. Sorry, this is the end of part 1. There's going to be a second video for part 2. Go back to Edmodo, click on it. We'll finish this example and then work on questions.